So, Jen, you started out as a football player. Crazy thought. And then around 15, you switched to rugby. Now, to say your journey has been incredible is perhaps an understatement. You're a former captain of Team Canada's Women Rugby Sevens. You've won an Olympic bronze medal, as Gabrielle shared, during the Rio 2016 Games. And you are known as one of the best women's rugby seven players, not just in Canada, but in the world. Now, I'm going to guess that journey came with some highs and some lows. I'd like you to share some of that with us.
Well, yeah, that's when you sum up my career like that, it is pretty phenomenal, and I'm super grateful that I had such an amazing career. But like you said, there was highs and there were lows, and some of the highs obviously were, being named the captain of Canada's women's sevens team. That was a dream come true. I worked really hard to gain that title, and I held that title with a lot of responsibility and pride. Leading a talented group of female athletes to the Olympics and medaling was definitely the biggest high I think I'll ever have in my sporting career. And I was overcome with like a mix of pride, elation, and gratitude. It was a moment that will forever be etched into my memory because I also got to experience that moment with my dad. And that was a huge moment for my dad and I, but also Canada fell in love with that moment, so traveling the world, going through 7 passports, I was a kid that grew up poor, and rugby brought me, a life that I don't think I would have ever had I not joined the sport. But along with the highs, there's definitely lows, and the physical demands of the sport really pushed me to my limits, and the injuries took a toll on me, forcing me to confront the fragility of the body and the mental hurdles of rehabilitation. The sacrifices I made along the way, such as being away from my family and friends, missing out on life events, was challenging, and also the pressure to perform at the highest levels sometimes felt overwhelming because it was very rare that I was playing at 100%, which led to self-doubt and moments of frustration. But with all that being said, there is definitely many more highs than there were lows.
It's crazy to think that you played with self-doubt and not feeling 100%, considering your career, Jen. I mean, seriously, wow. So I guess you played for 13 seasons, right? That's a long time. And I know you suffered a few concussions. Do you have any idea as to how many concussions you think you suffered? And what was the impact of those?
So as the intro mentioned, I was diagnosed with 5 concussions, major concussions that I know about, but there were many more that went undiagnosed. And I believe the number is probably around 30 plus. And that's a lot. That is a lot. And the impact of these concussions on my physical and mental well-being has been extensive and continues to affect me to this day. Now, each diagnosed concussion brought a range of symptoms that made it challenging for me to continue playing, from severe headaches and dizziness to memory loss and difficulty in concentrating. These injuries, these concussions had a profound impact on my ability to perform at my best and function on the daily off the pitch, which really ultimately was the toughest thing for me. The recovery process was often long and difficult, requiring testing, medical treatment, and therapy to regain my strength and cognitive function. However, it's the undiagnosed concussions that trouble me. Throughout my career, there were countless instances where I experienced blows to the head that left me disoriented and confused. And yet I never sought medical attention or reported these incidents. And the cumulative effects of these concussions have left me with lingering issues to this very day. I still struggle with memory lapses and have difficulty focusing for extended period of time. And additionally, I experience occasional bouts of depression and anxiety, which I believe are related to brain injury and that I endured during my playing career. And so it's definitely, I played through a lot, and it's definitely had a profound effect on my life after retirement.
My gosh, Jen. What was the tipping point? Like you talk about anxiety, depression, dizziness, like lack of focus, that's a lot of stuff. So at what point did you say, okay, that's enough, I need to get some help? And like, what happened? How did that work out for you?
So it took me quite some time to reach out for help and address the impact of these concussions. It was not until after I retired, like the tipping point for me came when I realized that the symptoms were simply just not going away on their own. Even after I stopped playing, I started noticing a decline in my cognitive abilities, and my overall well-being was being compromised. It was really like a combination of physical discomfort, cognitive difficulties, and emotional challenges that prompted me to seek assistance from medical professionals specializing in traumatic brain injuries. It was also a tough decision to make, as I always prided myself on my resilience and toughness as an athlete. I definitely did not give my brain injuries the same respect as the injuries I could see, and I continue to pay the ultimate price.
Yes, giving your brain injuries the same respect as the ones on your body, right? The ones you can actually see, a broken arm, a big bruise, a gash, you can see those, but you can't see the ones on your brain. So what advice would you give to those young athletes who are looking up to you, who've looked up to you for a long time, regarding the importance of prioritizing your mental and brain health?
Yeah, to all the young athletes out there, I cannot stress enough the importance of prioritizing mental and brain health in sports. It's easy to get caught up in the competitive spirit and the desire to excel, but we must remember that our brains are the most vital organs in our bodies. Neglecting their well-being can have serious consequences, not only for our athletic performance, but also for our long-term health and quality of life, which I am currently struggling with. So my advice to these young athletes is to take brain injuries seriously and seek proper medical attention and recovery when necessary. Don't ignore the warning signs or push through the pain, which I've done several times. Listen to your body and your mind, and remember that your brain health should always be a top priority, because I can tell you right now, there is no amount of accolades or Olympic medals that ends up being worth your brain health. And I have to say, I never in a million years would have ever thought that statement would come out of my mouth, because I have always had the mindset of, I don't care what my retired life looks like. As long as I achieve my dream of going to the Olympics and trying to be the best in the world. I was wrong, naive, and short-sighted.
Okay, that is impactful. That stirs my core when you say that kind of stuff, that no medal, no accolade is worth what you're going through today. Like that's a huge statement, Jen, coming from you. But I think it's so important for the kids out there to hear that, because all they see, all they think about, and I am generalizing, but many kids today think about right now. They don't always think about what's coming up. And if I can just share just a personal thing, my daughter played ringette, competitive ringette, and at her 4th concussion, we were at the doctor's office to get clearance to go back to the sport. And the doctor told her, do you have plans to go to university? She goes, well, yeah, of course I do. Then he goes, you cannot return to play. If you plan to return to play, you cannot risk getting another concussion. And at that time, that was a really hard pill to swallow for all of us. But I'm so, so glad for that doctor, for that moment. That was like a clear aha moment for us. Like that was, your brain comes first, as you've just said. Nothing is more precious than your brain. Without your brain, there's very little you can accomplish, right? So, question for you. So, rugby has and you're playing a few years ago, rough sport, lots of concussion, lots of injuries, period. Now, I do know that over the last couple of years, we've had Rugby Canada and Rugby Ontario showcased during the symposium. And in particular, the last 2 years with the announcement of the blue card and the officials on the field being able to withdraw people from play, and the process that's involved now, like recently. So from your point of view, from your perspective on the safety of sport in rugby, has that evolved since your retirement? And what changes or improvement, in addition to that, would you like to see when it comes to keeping our athletes safe?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
Sorry.
Okay, let me try to answer this in one bout here. During my playing career, the awareness and understanding of the long-term effects of concussions were not as advanced as they are today, which you have stated. Back then, if a player, if a player suffered a head injury, the typical response was to simply shake it off and continue playing. That's things that I've done many of times. Mm-hmm. There was a prevailing culture that toughness and resilience were valued above all else. That's when I played. However, as I reflect on my own experiences and witness the growth, the growing body of research on concussions, I now recognize the importance of taking a more cautious approach to athlete safety with baseline testing and follow-up assessments to accurately assess the severity of the injury and determine a safe return to play timeline. Now, when it comes to improvements within sport, I believe that education and awareness should be prioritized at all levels of sport, from grassroots to professional, to the professional stage. Athletes, coaches, and parents need to be well informed about the signs and symptoms of concussions, as well as the potential consequences of playing with an undiagnosed or untreated head injury. Additionally, I guess implementing stricter protocols for concussion management and ensuring that healthcare professionals trained in sport-related head injuries are readily available at all games, but also practices, because a lot of these injuries happen during practice. This would not only enhance the safety of athletes, but also provide a support system for them during the recovery process. With all this being said, I will say that, and you mentioned that Rugby Canada and Ontario Rugby is a leading organization in concussion management with their Play Smart program, which puts the players before the game itself. And my hope is to see every sporting body across the world follow suit. It's really important. It does start at the grassroots, and it's really important to make a safe space for athletes to be able to say, hey, this happened, and not want to hide it. So I hope that kind of summarized the question.
It totally did. And if you were here, be going, high five. That was so awesome. That was so great. Yes, high five. Okay, so one last question for me. I know our Q&A box has been exploding. So my last question for you, Jen, is if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, what would you want her to know?
Listen, I go back in time all the time talking to myself and go, why weren't you smarter? What is wrong with you? I'm I say to my wife all the time, man, if I could go back, my career would be a lot longer. But looking back, if I could speak to my younger self, in all honesty, I would emphasize the significance of taking care of my body and prioritizing my long-term health. I would stress the importance of not downplaying or ignoring any potential concussions or head injuries, and encourage myself to seek immediate medical attention and follow, proper recovery protocols, because I never did. I was just I'm fine and don't worry about it. I'm not really injured. I played through a broken pelvis. And that's not okay, because I'm currently pregnant, and the pregnancy is affecting my pelvis. And so there's a lesson in that. But lastly, I would remind myself that there is more to life than just rugby. And that's a really important thing, because while the sport holds a special place in my heart, it is essential to maintain a balanced perspective and prioritize my overall well-being, both on field and off field. And I, again, never thought that I would be saying this. I'm the last person that I feel people would be like, well, really? But yeah, that's what I would say.
And you know what? I think because it's coming from you, it means so much more. You're tough. You were tough. You're tough today. And for you to say those words resonate loudly. And I hope people in this room listening to this will be sharing your story and your message to others for a long time to come. Jen, I can't thank you enough for having this conversation with me. When we met you a couple weeks ago, I went, oh my God, I love Jen. I love your energy. I love your story. I love your passion for the sport. And I also love your passion for continuing to raise awareness about the importance of concussion and mental health. Right? Brain health. It is critical in order to stay in our sports for a very, very long time. Now, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Brinna. A few questions have come in through a Q&A box, so I know that it's important for us to hear from our participants. So, Brinna, over to you for a few questions with Jen.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Jen, I had shivers during that talk on multiple occasions. So that was amazing. Thank you so, so much. And Kim, thank you for facilitating. That was awesome. And Jen, I just want to say, thank you for sharing your story and all of the things that you're continuing to do to advance concussion awareness. And just these discussions, I think, go such a long way. So thank you for everything. So our chat box, as Kim said, is blowing up. So I have a couple questions for you. The first one for you is, based on your experience, what would you encourage athletic therapists, coaches, etc., to do or say to discourage athletes from playing through the signs and symptoms of a concussion?
I would say that, I don't know. It definitely, as a player who's experienced many concussions, and you have pressures from the staff. Ultimately, I feel like athletes don't disclose their injuries because they're afraid that their placement on the team will be compromised, which there is a real risk to that, because when you're not on the field, the next person, your teammate, is waiting to take that place from you, and you may not get that place back if they perform really well, and so there's that real genuine fear from the athlete side. And then also there's, with the medical staff and coaches and et cetera, everybody's in the program to ultimately win. And sometimes player welfare gets pushed to the side because if, when I was saying that I was never playing at 100%, my 80% was still, better than some of the rookies at the time. And so they're like, whatever, just play. And so I think it's really important to create a safe environment where there's open dialogue between the coaches, the medical staff, the physios, and a dialogue of giving that player the sense of, what, you're out right now, but it doesn't, there's still a spot for you. You still matter. And because when you're faced with a concussion, you're confused and, you're struggling where you don't feel like you're important. At least I never did. When I was out with an injury, I always felt like I don't matter. No one cares, because the focus isn't on me anymore. It's on the team, and I'm not in that environment. I'm out to the side recovering. So I think, just to sum it all up, I think it's on the coaches, the physios, the medical staff to make the athlete feel safe enough to disclose this information, but also keep their eyes open when they do see something occur, that they're immediately taking action, but also giving the player the insurance that they are, the reassurance, that they are okay and that they still have a place on this team.
Yeah, Jen, I really loved that point about not feeling supported once you're injured. I think that is so important, that everyone kind of comes around the athlete. They're still part of the team. They're still important. So we need to make sure that they feel that way. That was amazing. And for everyone tuning in the afternoon, we are going to be talking about concussion reporting and the role that everybody else kind of plays in supporting reporting. So I think you teed that session up really nicely there, Jen. So my next question for you from the audience was there a particular treatment or technique that you found most helpful in your recovery? If you're comfortable sharing that.
Okay, this is hard for me to answer, just for the fact that I never recovered properly. And that was one of the lessons of that. I just rushed myself back on field. I sustained one of my biggest concussions in 2013 at the World Cup. I received the concussion, my first concussion of my series of concussions, I guess. Not in 2013, but in a game of the semifinal, and I never disclosed it. And I was on caffeine and all these other things that help us, perform. And then I re-injured my head in the final, and then it was so bad. And I see. And the thing is, here's the thing, okay? With these concussions, sometimes the squirrel in my brain goes like dee dee dee, and I'm like, what the hell was the question? This is part of the pain of brain injury. Is like, okay, I go off, right? And so I'm just gonna quickly ask you, what was the question?
I think you kind of touched on it, Jen. But the question was around any treatments that you found particularly helpful. But no, you were circling it.
Yeah, okay, I'll come back to it. The hamster is just like, dink, squirrel. But anyway, so yeah, when I definitely, I sustained these concussions, and I'm telling you, you know what it is? It's pregnancy brain. I didn't recover properly. At the end of the day, I did not recover properly. I did not disclose my injuries, more so than not. And when I did disclose my concussions, I didn't follow the protocol. At the end of the day, I didn't. I was just like, yeah, I'm fine. And I would push and try to run. And then I'd feel like my brain is rattling inside my skull. And then I would lie on my return to play protocol and say, yeah, I passed it. Yep, I passed it. And I would just purely lie. So like, there is no techniques really that I can really say that helped me other than rest. And I didn't learn that until after I retired.
Yeah, I think rest is such an important thing to call out too. And I think it's also important to remember everyone's different, right? So what works for one person might work well for another or not. So yeah, that's amazing, Jen. Thank you so much. And you actually kind of led into another question I had about your concussion in the 2013 World Cup quarterfinals. So can you describe the conflicting emotions you felt when choosing to continue to play despite the concussion you had suffered?
Oh, yeah, that was, again, the fear, like the World Cup in rugby, a World Cup at the time, before it was part of the Olympics, was the biggest event you could play. And rugby players take a lot of pride in going to World Cups. It's a really hard team to make. So it's a pinnacle event. And now the Olympics, obviously in sevens, is definitely like the major stage of sport. At least for rugby. But when I sustained those concussions, it was my first sevens World Cup, and I was leading the team, and I was so short-sighted on the impact that it would have. I also knew that we had a month off after the Olympics, or after the World Cup, and so I was like, whatever, I'll just play through it and I'll get time to recover. But I knew that I wasn't going to get that moment back. I didn't know if I was going to go to another World Cup. I knew that I was, definitely getting older. And I just felt like maybe if I say something, maybe they will pull me or maybe they won't. At that time, there wasn't a lot on concussion, and I didn't want to risk it. And I didn't want to let my teammates down. I think ultimately that was the biggest, is like, I felt like if I were to say something and I got removed, that I would be letting my teammates down. And it's hard to sit out on major games like that. And then also, disappoint not only your teammates, but your fans and your family. And not everybody understands how severe concussions can be, right? And so, I was fear of judgment. So it was very conflicting. And at the end of the day, like I made that choice, and I try not to regret it, because that was one of my biggest concussions that I sustained. But it's hard not to regret it when I'm suffering so deeply to this very day.
Jen, I really appreciate you kind of tying in all of the different factors that kind of come into your thought process, because I think it's really valuable for everyone to kind of know what's going through an athlete's head, because if we have an idea of what's going on there, maybe we can, send messages and kind of share things in a way that'll that'll help promote reporting. So thank you. So we have a question actually from a referee who's on the call. And the question is, how important do you think it is for referees to be involved in identifying concussions? For example, with the Blue Card Initiative in rugby. Would this be a helpful initiative in other sports, in your opinion?
100%, because they are the closest to the players. They actually can hear the contact happening. You know, when you're in a stadium with thousands of people and you can't even hear, you know, your coach yelling from the sideline, or you can barely hear your teammates, the ref, at least in rugby, and is like right in there. And I think refs they're always the closest to the players, and they have eyes on everything. I definitely think that refs should be given power to pull players. And it gets a little bit sticky because I know people are like, listen, some refs aren't neutral. You know, like we look at the Canada-US game for the women's, you know, our women's Canadian team, and there's that controversial call and stuff. But I think refs play with great integrity, and I do trust that they will always look out for the best interest of the player before the game. And I do think that's a great way to keep players safe. And what does it hurt? You know, if you sustain your concussion, or you hit your head, you go off the field, you do your concussion protocol. If you pass, you're back on field. It's not a big deal. If you fail, then you should not be put back on field. So I don't think there's any harm in having refs, like giving refs that power.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that's a call for action for everyone on the screen, is like, how can we think about integrating this into other sports, and what might that look like? Because I agree. I think it's such a great idea and could be really, really beneficial. Okay, Jen, I have another, sorry for all the questions. Everyone's loving your talk, so you're getting lots of questions from the audience. So the next question I have for you is, what about the role that your family, friends, and coaches played when it came to choosing to or not to report a concussion? And I know sometimes we're different then, but is there anything you wish they had said or known to support you?
So I was pretty secretive with my injuries. So there a lot of time they didn't know. And it's not even really about what they would say or the advice they would give me. It really turns back to me and me disclosing and being honest about, you know, why I'm not, why I'm struggling or what I'm going through. Because I know that my family and friends would have had like a bird's eye view on it and would have said, listen, there's more to life than this sport. You will get to where you need to get to in this sport, but if you want a long career, you need to take care of yourself. And I really wish that I would have just ultimately disclosed my injuries, not only to my family and friends, but to my coach, and you know, and it was only the injuries that you could physically see on me where I was limping, or you know, I was, you know, looked dazed after a head injury. Like, it was only those where people are like, wait a minute. But yeah, they, at the end of the day, like, I was just so secretive, and that's just terrible. I hope really athletes are listening to this, because I really hope that they know that you don't need to be secretive. And if you are, you're going to have a short career, and you're not only going to have a short career, you're going to struggle after your career. And there's just way more to life than that.
Okay, Jen, thank you so much. Those were so many amazing takeaways, and they will be shared lots over the Cirque platforms in the next little while. So just a huge thank you again for joining us today and for sharing your story. You are truly inspirational, and we're so grateful to have had the opportunity to learn from you today. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was fun.